You know what's strange? In our endless cultural conversation about generations, we seem to have a few favorite subjects. We analyze the boomers, the generation that reshaped the world in their image. We obsess over millennials, dissecting their every economic woe and avocado toast. And we study Gen Z like they're a brand new species. Native to a digital world the rest of us are just visiting. But there's a ghost in the machine, a quiet middle. The generation that's consistently, almost comically, overlooked. Generation X. They're the connective tissue of our modern society, yet they remain practically invisible. Born roughly between 1965 and 1980, they're the demographic sandwich generation. They're your calmest coworkers, the ones who just get the work done without the drama. They're your parents who don't overshare on social media, whose digital footprint is surprisingly light. These are the people who literally built the scaffolding of the modern internet in their youth, but never felt the need to compulsively document their lives on it. They created the tools for the party, but often chose not to be the center of attention. And here's the truth most people miss, the central thesis of our entire exploration today. Gen X might be the most psychologically misunderstood generation alive. Their quietness isn't apathy. Their skepticism isn't cynicism. It's a complex, deeply ingrained psychological toolkit forged in a very specific and often harsh environment. To understand them, you have to go back. Picture this. It's 1978. You're 8 years old. You walk into an empty house after school. No cell phone to text "I'm home." No GPS tracker on an app. No one is checking if you made it home safely, because there was no way for them to check. The world simply operated on a higher level of trust and a lower level of supervision. You let yourself in with a key on a string around your neck. You make your own snack, probably something with questionable nutritional value. You do your homework alone, or maybe you just watch TV. And then you wait. You wait for a parent to get home from a job they might be terrified of losing. This wasn't an exception. For millions, this was just Tuesday. This was the crucible of the latchkey kid, and it's where our story really begins. This scene, or some version of it, wasn't rare. It was the wallpaper of a generation. By the mid-1980s, as divorce rates climbed and more mothers entered the workforce, millions of kids were growing up this way. They were called latchkey kids, named for the house key many wore on a string around their necks. It was a symbol of a new kind of childhood. One lived in the quiet hours between the last school bell and a parent's car pulling into the driveway. We talk about the independence this fostered, and that's true. But what we seldom discuss is the profound psychological imprint it left. What did it actually do to their developing minds? Because that empty house didn't just teach you how to make a snack or not burn the place down. It taught something far deeper, a lesson absorbed in the silence. You're on your own. There was no one there to immediately soothe a scraped knee, mediate a fight with a friend, or help with confusing homework. No emotional buffering, no constant support, no safety net. Just you, your actions, and their direct, unfiltered consequences. Psychologists call this a high-contingency environment. It's a space where the link between cause and effect is brutally clear and immediate. Forget your key? You're sitting on the porch until 6 p.m. Burn the grilled cheese? You're eating a burnt grilled cheese, or you're not eating. Faced with this reality day after day, their brains did the only thing brains can do. They adapted. This wasn't about stress, it was about strategy. They learned to think ahead, to run scenarios in their minds constantly, to anticipate problems before they arose. To read situations and people with incredible speed, because misjudging carried a real cost. This constant, low-level cognitive workout built a powerful capacity for foresight. And that's why so many from Gen X often seem like they're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers, always thinking 3 steps ahead. It's not a power move or a sign of anxiety. It's a deeply ingrained survival skill, forged in the quiet solitude of an empty house. It's not because they want to be, but because they had to be. For the generation before them, the path seemed clear, almost contractual. It was a promise whispered from the post-war boom years, a social contract their parents had bought into completely. The deal was simple. Work hard. Be loyal to your company. Play by the established rules. In return, life would provide a predictable upward trajectory, a stable career, a home in the suburbs, a pension, a gold watch at retirement. It was the bedrock assumption of the American dream, a belief in a system that rewarded diligence and conformity with security. Gen X kids absorbed this narrative by osmosis, watching their fathers go to the same job for decades, their mothers managing households built on that stability. It was the world as it was supposed to be. Then came the shock. Not a single event, but a slow, grinding disillusionment throughout the 70s and 80s. They watched those rules, that entire social contract, collapse in real time. The oil crisis, stagflation, the hollowing out of the manufacturing belt, these weren't just headlines, they were tremors that shook the foundations of their own homes. Divorces, once a rarity spoken of in hushed tones, skyrocketed, splitting families and forcing a generation to navigate the complexities of two households, two sets of rules. And then came the corporate restructuring. The loyal, hard-working parents who had played by the rules were suddenly handed pink slips. The concept of a job for life evaporated, replaced by the brutal reality of layoffs that hit families hard, erasing decades of dedication overnight. The promise of stability turned out to be a myth. The floor wasn't solid, it was a trapdoor. For a child or a teenager witnessing this, the lesson was profound and unforgettable. You cannot trust the system. Loyalty is not always rewarded. The rug can be pulled out from under you at any time, without warning. So, faced with this profound uncertainty, Gen X developed a powerful psychological adaptation. It's what psychologists call defensive pessimism. This isn't the same as full-blown cynicism, which assumes the worst and gives up. It's more strategic. It's a quiet, deeply ingrained expectation that things can probably fall apart at any moment. It's a cognitive strategy. By anticipating potential failures, you can mentally prepare for them. You can build contingency plans. If you expect the project to fail, you have a backup plan ready. If you expect the job to disappear, you're already thinking about your next move. It's a way of managing anxiety by taking control of the worst-case scenarios in your mind before they happen in reality. And this mindset directly explains their complicated relationship with the digital world. It's why you rarely hear them shouting on social media. It's not that they don't understand technology. That's one of the biggest misconceptions. They were the bridge generation. They grew up analog and came of age just as the digital world was being born. They were the ones in the computer labs in the 80s, the early adopters of dial-up in the 90s. They helped build the very architecture of the internet we use today. They understand it perfectly. They just don't trust the exposure. Their formative years were spent in a world where mistakes had a shelf life. An embarrassing comment, a youthful misjudgment, it would fade from memory, lost to time. Now, everything is permanent. Every post, every photo, every ill-conceived opinion is archived, searchable, and shareable forever. The digital world is a permanent record, and for a generation taught by experience that things can go wrong, that's a terrifying prospect. To them, this constant, high-stakes visibility feels like radical vulnerability. It's like standing on that trapdoor, but now there's a global audience watching and waiting for it to spring. So they built shields. They learned to value privacy not as secrecy, but as a necessary boundary for sanity and self-preservation. They curate their digital footprint with a caution that can look like apathy or technophobia to other generations, but is in fact a calculated act of self-defense. And these shields aren't loud, aggressive walls. They're subtle. They are masters of sarcasm, a tool that allows them to say something and its opposite at the same time, creating a protective layer of ambiguity. They use dry humor to deflect sincerity. They maintain a certain emotional distance, an ironic detachment that keeps the world at arm's length. They learned early on to laugh things off before they could hurt. It's a survival mechanism honed over a lifetime of watching things fall apart. A quiet, resilient strategy for navigating a world they never fully trusted. To truly understand the Gen X mindset, You have to go back to the ambient noise of their childhood. And that noise wasn't just the sound of cicadas or a television in the other room. It was the low, constant hum of existential dread. This makes sense when you realize what they grew up under. The Cold War. Nuclear anxiety wasn't an abstract concept. It was a scheduled activity. It was the duck and cover drills in school. Think about the sheer absurdity of that for a moment. A teacher, someone you trust, instructs you to hide under a flimsy piece of plywood to protect yourself from a thermonuclear explosion. Even as a child, on some level, you know it's a performance, a ritual of futility. You're being taught a procedure that offers the illusion of safety, but not the real thing. This wasn't a fire drill where you practiced a genuine escape. This was practicing for the unsurvivable, and this lesson was reinforced everywhere. Imagine being a kid, watching Saturday morning cartoons, and then the program is interrupted by a stark, black and white civil defense announcement. Or you're sitting in the living room, and the evening news anchor calmly discusses missile counts and potential global annihilation, right before cutting to a commercial for laundry detergent. You're told the world could end at any moment, but you're also told not to worry about it, and to make sure your grades are good. When you're raised in that kind of profound cognitive dissonance, you learn to live with contradiction. You develop a kind of psychological armor. If the adults in charge are telling you to prepare for the apocalypse while also planning a weekend barbecue, you learn not to take their pronouncements too seriously. You learn to trust your own judgment over the official story. This is the fertile ground where Gen X's signature skepticism and dark, ironic humor took root. It's a coping mechanism. When the world feels absurd, you either laugh or you go crazy. But here's what's fascinating. You might expect a generation raised on the idea that the future is a coin toss to be fatalistic, to be disengaged. And in some ways they were. But in one specific area, the opposite happened. Despite everything, Gen X developed one of the most ferocious, deeply ingrained work ethics you'll ever see. It's a quiet engine, humming just beneath the cynical surface. They don't talk about it. They don't post hustle culture manifestos on social media. There are no inspirational quotes on their walls. They just do the work. It's not about passion, or finding your bliss, or changing the world. It's about a fundamental, almost primal sense of responsibility. You show up. You do what you said you would do. You finish the job. Period. Because they started early. This wasn't about building a resume for college. It was just what you did. Paper routes at sunrise, rain or shine, part-time jobs after school as teenagers, bagging groceries, washing dishes, working retail. They were handling real responsibility long before they were technically adults. They learned that if the papers didn't get delivered, people would call and complain. If the cash drawer was short at the end of your shift, it came out of your meager paycheck. The consequences were direct and immediate. This early exposure to the mechanics of work forged a core belief that has defined their entire professional lives. They don't believe in job security. How could they? They saw their parents, the loyal company men and women of the silent generation, get laid off in the recessions of the 70s and 80s. They saw entire industries vanish. They learned that loyalty to a corporation is a one-way street. So instead, they believe in personal competence. The logic is simple and brutal. A job can disappear overnight. A company can go bankrupt. A boss can be a fool. But your skills, your ability to solve a problem, to build something, to manage a process, to learn a new system, that belongs to you. That's portable. Because if nothing is stable, your skill set is the only true currency you have. It's the only thing you can actually rely on. It's not about climbing a ladder. It's about building your own toolkit, so you can build your own ladder, wherever and whenever you need to. To truly understand the Gen X mindset, you have to grasp a central paradox. It's a generation defined by a fierce, almost cellular independence, yet simultaneously capable of a quiet, profound loyalty. They won't ask for help. It's not in their programming. The manual for that was lost somewhere in an empty house in the 80s. But if need help, they show up. There's no grand announcement, no posturing for credit, no noise, just a steady presence, a problem solved, a weight lifted. It's a loyalty born not from obligation, but from a deep-seated empathy for anyone else navigating a world that often feels like it's rigged against you. They know what it's like to be on your own, so they'll never let you be completely alone if they can help it. This quiet competence extends directly to their relationship with authority, which is just as complex. They don't respect titles, they respect competence. A fancy job title, a corner office, a list of accolades, that's all just noise. What matters is, can you do the job? Do you know what you're talking about? If you prove your capability, if you demonstrate expertise and integrity, they will follow you through fire. They will be the most dedicated, resourceful ally you could ever ask for. But if you don't, if you're all talk, a hollow suit propped up by a system of promotions rather than merit, they see right through you, instantly, and that respect evaporates. It's not insubordination, it's a quiet, internal dismissal. They'll do the work, but their trust, their true buy-in, is gone. You have to remember the world that forged this perspective. They grew up watching authority fail, repeatedly and spectacularly. Politically, they saw scandals that eroded faith in the highest offices. Economically, they witnessed their parents, the so-called greatest generation, get laid off from companies they'd given their lives to, shattering the myth of the corporate safety net. Socially, institutions that were supposed to be pillars of stability crumbled. So they learned a critical lesson early, a lesson that became a core operating principle. Position doesn't equal capability. Trust is earned, not bestowed by an org chart. This wasn't cynicism for its own sake. It was a survival mechanism, a pragmatic filter for a world where the promises of stability were consistently broken. And just as they entered their prime earning years, ready to build their own stability, that pattern of broken promises continued. Financially, they were hit again and again with a kind of cruel, generational timing. They graduated into recessions, bought their first homes just as bubbles were about to burst. First, the dot-com crash vaporized the first wave of tech-driven wealth and optimism. Then, just as they were recovering, hitting their stride in their 30s and 40s, the 2008 global financial crisis delivered a body blow. It felt like every time they gained momentum, every time they managed to get a foot on the next rung of the ladder, something came along and pulled the rug out from under them. It wasn't a single event, it was a series of economic aftershocks that taught them that financial security is a fleeting, fragile thing. So they adapted. Of course they did. Adaptation is their superpower. They became the architects of the side hustle, the pioneers of the gig economy, not out of a burning desire to be entrepreneurs, but out of necessity. Multiple income streams became the new 401k. Backup plans became the new pension. This led to a quiet financial caution, a kind of defensive pessimism applied to their bank accounts. They save, they invest, they diversify. Not because they're overly ambitious for lavish wealth, but because they've learned through painful experience that nothing is guaranteed. The job you have today could be gone tomorrow. The market that's up this year could be down the next. This isn't fear, it's pragmatism. It's the financial embodiment of trust, but verify. But this strength, this radical self-reliance, comes with a cost, a significant one. Research consistently shows that Gen X is the least likely generation to seek mental health support or even admit to friends and family that they're struggling. They are the most stressed, yet the most silent. It's not because they don't have people who care. It's not a lack of love or connection. It's because the very act of asking for help feels unnatural. For some, it's even deeply uncomfortable, a sign that they've failed at their primary directive, to handle it. To be the one who has it all together, even when they're falling apart inside. They were trained from childhood to handle things alone, to be the responsible one, the one who didn't add to the burden. So they do, even when they shouldn't have to, even when the weight is crushing. This ethic of self-sufficient effort extends to how they process the world itself. They grew up in a world where information wasn't instant. It wasn't a passive stream you bathed in, it was a destination you traveled to. If you wanted to know something, you had to go to the library. You had to use the card catalog, navigate the Dewey Decimal System, pull heavy volumes of encyclopedias off the shelf. You had to search for it, work for it, earn it. Information was a finite resource that required deliberate action to acquire. And that effort, that friction in the system, created something incredibly rare today: deep understanding. Because they had to work for it, they valued it more. They didn't just consume information, they had to digest it, synthesize it, connect the dots themselves. They learned to evaluate sources, to weigh different perspectives, because the process itself was slow and manual. They absorbed it. It became part of their intellectual framework, not just a fleeting factoid swiped away on a screen. This built a cognitive muscle for critical thinking and a healthy skepticism toward information that seems too easy, too simple, or too loud. And now they're watching a completely different world emerge. A world they helped build, ironically, by creating the technologies that underpin it. But it's a world that operates on a fundamentally different principle. A world of constant connection, constant visibility, constant noise, an endless fire hose of information, opinion, and performance. They see the benefits, the access, the community. But they also see the downside, because their own formative experiences give them a unique contrast. They remember the quiet. They remember when a mistake wasn't permanent digital record. They remember when your thoughts were your own, not a draft for a public post. As parents, this creates another complex dynamic. They were determined to be more present than their own often absent parents. They gave their kids the attention, the validation, the support they themselves never had. They showed up for the soccer games, the school plays, the parent-teacher conferences. But now, as they watch their children navigate this hyper-connected, high-pressure digital landscape, they sometimes wonder, did we make things too easy? In protecting them from the harsh independence we knew, did we forget to teach them the value of solitude? In giving them instant access to everything, did we devalue the process of discovery? In encouraging them to share, did we make them too exposed? It's the quiet worry of a generation that knows the value of what's been lost, even as they appreciate what's been gained. Because to Gen X, the core values are etched in stone. Privacy equals safety. It's the freedom to be yourself without an audience, to make mistakes without a permanent record. Independence equals survival. It's the core belief that you are your own safety net. And silence isn't weakness. It's not emptiness. It's strength. It's the space where you think, where you process, where you find your own signal in the noise. It's the confidence to not need to shout to know you exist. The truth is, Generation X isn't loud. They're not the main character in the generational drama. They're not trying to be seen. They're not chasing attention. They are the bridge generation. The crucial, often invisible link between the analog world of their childhood and the digital one they helped build. They are fluent in both languages. They remember life before the internet, but they are architects of its code. They understand the value of a handwritten letter and the efficiency of an email. They are the translators, the mediators, the ones holding the past and the future in a delicate, functional balance. And bridges don't ask for recognition. They don't need applause or accolades. They just do their job. They hold everything together. If this exploration of the Gen X psyche resonated with you, or maybe made you see your parents, your colleagues, or even yourself a little differently, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the psychology that shapes our world. We're building a community here dedicated to understanding the why behind the what. And if you want to directly support the research and production that goes into content like this, you can hit the join button to become a channel member. We're committed to telling the important stories, especially the ones that are often overlooked. Now, I want to hear from you. Comment Gen X below if you relate or if you learned something new. What part of this hit the hardest? Was it the self-reliance, the skepticism of authority, the feeling of being a bridge? I'll be in the comments for the first few hours, replying to as many as I can. Your engagement really does help these ideas reach more people. Thank you for watching.